This is different, really, insofar as I knew Anthony Bourdain. We started at the Travel Channel together. And in fact, before that, I'd never heard of him. He was already famous. He had his book out called Kitchen Confidential. He'd already had a TV series, Cook's Tour on Food Network. So by the time I ran into him, he was really pretty well established. He'd been a chef for years and was now a celebrity chef, but I'd never heard of him. We went to a meeting together at the Travel Channel with a bunch of executives, and we had to kind of pitch what we were doing for our respective shows to these suits. He went first, and he was brilliant. I was just completely floored by him. He was so mature and so confident, even cocky, and so dedicated to what he was doing. He made the promise of, whatever you want from me, I will deliver. I will give you whatever you want. And then it came to my turn, and my only thought was, I don't know why I'm in television, really. I don't want to... It was totally self-centered and just, focused on my insecurities. And I looked so pathetic compared to Anthony Bourdain. I bought a copy of Kitchen Confidential just to learn what he was about, and he signed it for me, which was very nice. But what was curious about him was that he only ever spoke about himself when we were together. His grudges against other chefs, his annoyances with the Food Network and why he left and what he hated about them. He was cantankerous, he was impatient, he was rude sometimes. And you might say, well, that's the privilege of being such a brilliant, brilliant man. If you've read his stuff, he is an amazing writer. On TV, he was magnetic, but he only ever spoke about himself. I don't think during all the time we spent together that he ever asked me anything about myself. In fact, I know he didn't. Nothing. He never asked me anything about me or my show or what I was doing or what my background was or anything. If we were together, he just talked about himself. In fact, one time we were in a theatre waiting to give some kind of presentation. We were sitting in the green room and he was chatting about himself, and it was fascinating, by the way. I don't begrudge any of this. What he was saying, he knew was riveting stuff, and so I was happy to listen. But while he was talking, James Cameron walks in. You know, the guy who did Titanic and Avatar and stuff? And to be polite, I started talking to him. At which point, Anthony Bourdain decides that he's not now the most famous person in the room and just leaves, just walks out and leaves me talking to James Cameron about diving. Again, something I know nothing about. But anyway, so he lived in a completely different world to me. His attitude was completely diametrically opposite to mine. The way he punished himself with lack of sleep and with drugs in his younger days and with alcohol was just like nothing I'd ever witnessed. But he died at the age of 61 in France while on assignment for CNN. And he committed suicide, which shocked the world. And only then did I find out that he was a depressive, that he suffered from depression. I didn't know. And the suicide came when he had a daughter. He cleaned up his act a lot. He was looking after himself more. He was working out. He was some kind of martial arts guy now. He had a blue belt or something in jiu-jitsu. He'd really transformed his life. So not only was he now a clean living guy, he had a family, he was brilliant, he was getting nominated for Emmys, he was successful and rich and famous, and why would he kill himself? Nobody had the answer. So a lot of you asked for his pictures, which I did. And when I went into the energy You know, there's that metaphorical, symbolic tunnel I always see. It always starts off with somebody shooting in the far end and then acting out some kind of scenario. There was no tunnel entrance for him. First time ever. No tunnel entrance. What there was a long, thin staircase. It had one flight down, then a little landing, and then another flight down, but it was dark and it was thin. And he was halfway down when I found him. He came down the rest of the stairs and he was perky. Most people in these pictures so far have been sad, distressed, angry, something, paralyzed with shock, whatever it is. Not him. It was almost like he was just finished with that and now on to the next thing. Okay, that's that. Now, what else? I followed him around and he was still agitated and active. He really had this urge to collaborate and get things together and start moving on things and work to his calendar. And there was nobody to talk to. This took quite a while to sink in. And he looked around and he saw this tunnel and it was like, oh, I go up there? Okay. And he starts walking up this very gentle slope and it became steps. Now steps in the normal pictures in everyday life represent not necessarily obstacles but challenges. You know, you go up steps when you are trying to accomplish something, when there are little problems all the way along that you have to sort out. I'm not quite sure what they mean in transition pictures, actually. Why there will be steps up. But there were steps down for him. As he climbed these steps, he began to slow down. It was like there was just enough pushback in the challenge of climbing these steps to make him think and reflect and reconsider where he was going. If there were like 40 steps, at about 20, he sat down and thought, I'm sorry, what am I doing? What is this? And after that impulsive descent of those original steps, like, okay, that's done, just something I did, yep, right, okay, on to the next thing. After that, there was a delay almost before he realized the consequences and the repercussions, the reverberations energetically of what he'd done. What kind of commitment he'd made, perhaps even on the spur of the moment. Maybe he was depressed, maybe he was lonely. It's a very, very lonely business doing travel shows. He used to spend 250 days each year away from his family on the road making travel shows. When I made mine, I was away 15 months. It looks so great when you see it on TV and you think, wow, I would love to do a travel show. I would love for somebody else to pay me to fly around the world and eat exotic foods and live in all these various places. Yes, if you were doing that without making a TV show. When you also have to produce footage and do interviews and meet all these people and get stuff done all the time and get up early and go to bed late, and it's very, very grueling. I can imagine why this would get to him. Mid-assignment, mid-series, middle of the evening, or whatever. Just, I can't take this anymore. Spontaneous decision. But there was a delay in full realization of what he'd done. And he's sitting on these steps going, I should not have done this. I was rash. I was irresponsible. I want to go back. Now, as you know, there is a current to these things. There's no going back because the current is pulling you almost like there's a magnet. And even as I watched him, he began to lift off the floor and start to float. As he was pulled up the steps. But he wasn't having it. He hung on to the side of the tunnel. This symbolic tunnel I always see. He held on to the side of it and his legs were going up and he was going, no, I'm not doing that. Give me a moment. I've got to think about this. This is not what I thought it was going to be. This was not the plan. In the end, he had to be carried, but not in a sort of, come on dear, this'll be okay, you can do it, like helping overcome his fear. This wasn't grace stepping up to assist in an hour of need. This was, we've got to get this guy going. And he was turning his back on them, facing the other way. No, I've miscalculated. Still floating backwards. In the end, he had to be carried. It was almost like there were two wires holding him up, preventing him from walking backwards or reversing the decision or going back down the tunnel. Anything he might want to do. These wires, in effect, even though they're only symbolic, these wires held him up and carried him forward to the top of the tunnel. Now, I felt panic. Now I started to feel a little distressed. This goes beyond realization now. This is like full-blown understanding that a mistake has been made. Like you've booked a flight to Greece, but you meant to book a flight to Rome. Oh, but infinitely more serious. Cosmically devastating. And conclusive in this case. The wires, these symbolic wires, carried him along the next stretch of tunnel. At this point, he started thrashing around. You know, when you're swimming, I don't really swim very well, but you kind of go like this to move yourself forward. Right? Well, he was going this way, thinking, well, if I do this, I'll go backwards. I'll alter the flow of the current. I'll just move back. But the thrashing didn't help. He was being carried because he had to move. He had to be moved because he wouldn't go on his own. The tunnel has a curve in it. He goes along the tunnel, round the curve, just being carried. And as he rounds the curve and begins to get a sense of where he's heading, because the light is right there, he stops thrashing around, he calms down, and there is that sense of, oh, I get it. So now he's in this symbolic cave I always see with the dome in it. And he looks at it from above, almost like he would if he were doing a commentary on a city from high up in a castle or something. He's surveying it in that kind of way. And has already decided that he doesn't agree with what he's expected to do. The finality that comes with the next move is not something he is willing to countenance. No, sir. You brought me this far. I'm not going in there. And of course, there's no time in these sort of places. You have eternity to figure it out, I guess. So nothing happens, he just floats there. And I waited, and I waited. And for the very first time, looking at the dome, which I very rarely spend time looking at it because most people just go, oh yeah, all right, and go into it in some kind of form. But this time, there was a lot of waiting, of reluctance, of holding back. And when I looked at it, there were shifting lights. It wasn't lights, but shifting. You know when you stand under trees in the summer and there's a sort of shifting light, dappled sunlight kind of thing on the ground? It's a bit like that. In fact, what it seemed like, I remember the feeling, what it seemed like is, you know, on a cold winter's night, say it's snowing or something, or it's icy out, and you walk down the street and you go past a house where they're obviously having a good time inside. You hear laughter, you hear chatter, there's music, the windows are steamed up because it's warm inside, and there are lights and stuff, and you go, oh, I wish I was going in there. That kind of feeling was conjured up by staring at this globe. It was really subtle, but the feeling was there that something better and more involving and warm was going on beyond this membrane. You just couldn't see it, but he sensed it too. And after the longest time of evaluating the situation he was in and the shifting, dappled kind of lights beyond this membrane thing, he went, oh, F it. Crossed his arms and just went straight in. Which, having met him many times, is very much like him, as a matter of fact. But it was so quick. It was like impulsive. Oh, F it. And he just went straight in and disappeared. That was Anthony Bourdain. In my little book about believing, I discuss this whole thing of how you live your life, what quality of life you want to have. Whether there's the Anthony Bourdain, Christopher Hitchens kind of life, Hunter Thompson, where you go and go and go and go until you are a husk, until you are spent, until you've accomplished a million things and done everything there is possible to do, and you exit your life on a high. Even if the circumstances are grim, it's like, look at the dent I made in life. Look at the influence I had. And Anthony Bourdain, being brilliant in so many different ways, made a huge mark on society. Or we have the choice of pacing ourselves, being cautious, not doing these things that destroy the body, but building up the body. It's very much that path of higher intention or path of lesser intention. Do you live in integrity with your body? Or do you commit sins against the body? I suppose that would be it. Or is it your soul's path to live to the fullest and wear yourself out? He did that. He's one of those guys who said yes to life and who makes you feel that you've said no too many times. That was my feeling. He made me question how many times I said no. We were in a van together in Detroit. He was in the front seat next to the driver. I was in the middle seat. And Dr. Drew, you know Dr. Drew Pinsky? He was in the back seat. And Anthony Bourdain says, let's go to Canada. Detroit is very close to Canada. Let's go to Canada tonight. Dr. Drew goes, I got a show to do tonight. I can't do that. So Bourdain looks at me and goes, hey, come on, let's go. He just wanted a drinking companion. And at that moment, I had my yes-no moment. Do I go and live a life for one night like Anthony Bourdain? Who knows what trouble there would have been? Who knows what we'd have got into? Live that kind of life, eating strange things, drinking crazily. One night. And I said, no, thank you. I'm going to bed. I went to bed at about 10 o'clock. And he was crestfallen that he couldn't find anybody to go and live that life with. Am I the loser in that situation? One night with Anthony Bourdain. I'll never know. All right, thanks very much for watching, guys. I'll be back soon. Thank you. Bye-bye.